Howdy, everybody. Welcome back to another Reading with Rick. Today we're going to be getting into Charles Frazier's wonderful novel, Cold Mountain. This novel follows its protagonist, Inman, who is a Confederate soldier during the American Civil War. He's been injured in the very beginning of the novel. The bullet has grazed his neck, and he decides, laying in the infirmary, that he's just going to pack up what little he has, some food, and his Lamont revolver, and just head back home on foot to the mountains of North Carolina, which is also where Charles Frazier himself is from. He was born in Asheville, North Carolina. And so we're going to read a little bit more than we usually do. The section we're about to read is after Inman has been betrayed by a very peculiar family he meets along the road, and he has been basically turned over to the home guard with other deserters, and they are being marched back south, and we are at a point where they kind of stop and decide they're just going to execute the people now. So we'll get right into it. Inman had read books where prisoners in castle keeps scratch marks on sticks or rocks to track the passage of days, but he had not even the means to do that, though he could see how useful it would be because he had already started to doubt his mental calendar. No further accounting needed to be kept, though, for deep in the night the prisoners were roused from thin sleep by one of the guards. He shined a lantern in their faces and told them to stand. The other half-dozen guards stood in a loose group. Some of them were smoking pipes, and they held their rifle muskets butt down on the ground. One of them, who acted in the role of leader, said, "We had us a talk, and decided that you pack of shit are just wasting our time." At that, the guard raised their rifles. A captive boy, not much over 12, fell to his knees and commenced crying. An old man, gray-headed, said, "You can't mean to kill us all here." One of the guards lowered his weapon and looked to the leader and said, "I didn't sign on to kill grandpas and little boys." The leader said to him, "Cock back to fire or get down there with them." Inman looked off into the dark pine woods. "The view from my last resting place," he said within himself. Then the firing started with a volley. Men and boys began falling all around. Vesey stepped forward as far as the rope would allow and shouted amid the firing. He said, "It is not too late to put away this meanness." Then he was shot through a number of times. The ball that hit Inman had already passed through Vesey's shoulder, and as a result did not strike with full briskness. It took Inman in the side of the head at his hairline and ran along his skull between hide and bone, routing a shallow groove there as it passed. It exited behind his ear. He fell as if struck by a lathing hatchet, but consciousness did not leave him entirely. He could not move, not so much as to blink an eye, nor did he wish to. The world moved on about him, and he observed it, though he felt not a part of it. It seemed to scorn understanding. People died all around him and fell, all bound together. When the firing was done, the guards stood as if unclear as to what next step might be. One of them seemed taken by some fit or spell, and he danced about and sang Cotton Eye Joe and capered until another man hit him at the base of his spine with the stock of his musket. Finally, one said, "We'd best get them underground." They went about the job poorly, just digging out a shallow bed and strewing the men in and covering them with dirt about to the depth that one would plant potatoes. When done, they mounted up and rode away. Inman had fallen with his face in the crook of his arm, and he had breathing space, though the covering of dirt over him was so thin and loose that he might have lain there and starved before he smothered. He rested, drifting in and out of muddled wakefulness. The smell of the dirt pulled at him and drew him down, and he could not find the force to raise himself from it. Dying there seemed easier than not. But before the dawn of day, feral hogs descended from the woods, drawn by the tang in the air. They plowed at the ground with their snouts and dug out arms and feet and heads. And soon Inman found himself uprooted, staring eye to eye, forlorn and hostile and baffled, into the long face of a great tushed boar. "Yeah," Inman said. The boar shied off a few feet and stopped and looked back at him dumbfounded, his little eyes blinking. Inman prized his length out of the ground. To rise and bloom again, that became his wish. When Inman worked his way upright once more, the boar lost interest and went back to grubbing at the ground. Inman cast back his head to the sky and found it did not look right. There were stars in it, but he could not reason out even one known constellation in the moonless sky. It looked as if someone had taken a stick and stirred it up, so that no sense remained, just a smattering of light cast patternless on the general dark. As head wounds will do, his had bled all out of proportion to its actual direness. Blood covered his face and dirt had gummed to it. so that his visage was ochre in color and appeared like a clay sculpture illustrating some earlier phase of mankind when facial features were yet provisional. He found the 2 holes in his scalp and probed them with his fingers and found them numb and beginning to clot shut. He wiped at himself to little effect with the tail of his shirt. He commenced pulling on the rope at his hands, bent his back to it, and in a minute VC emerged from the ground like a big hooked bass pulled up from a muddy lake. VC's face was locked in an expression of numb bewilderment. His eyes were open and dirt clung to the wet of them. Looking on him, Inman could find no great sorrow at his death, but neither could he find this an example of justice working its way around to show proof that the wrong a man does flies back at him. Inman had seen so much death it had come to seem a random thing entirely. He could not even make a start at reckoning up how many deaths he had witnessed of late. It would number no doubt in the thousands, accomplished in every custom you could imagine, and some you couldn't come up with if you had thought at it for days. He had grown so used to seeing death, walking among the dead, sleeping among them, numbering himself calmly as among the near dead, that it seemed no longer dark and mysterious. He feared his heart had been touched by the fire so often he might never make a civilian again. So a very graphic scene. We see Inman again coming face to face with death, another bullet. Charles Frazier really does a good job at making this novel is, again, one of those, it's historical, it's realism in a sense, I guess you could say. It is some fine literature, but there's also this strand of magic through it as I read it. When I had heard about this book a lot, I knew it was going to be on my reading list. I needed to check it out as a writer. Figured, there's all kinds of things I could learn from someone great like Charles Frazier, who's had a number of great works. This was actually made into a film with some pretty big stars in it, and I think it won some awards. But anyways, when I had thought about reading this book, I had this sense of dread. I mean, I've told y'all before that I've read a lot of short fiction. My attention span is not always the best. So I knew it was a lengthier novel, in my opinion, not to some. But I also knew it was set, that Civil War era. I just was like, I don't know. I feel like I've read enough about that. But as I got into this book, it just kept pulling me along. Because like I said, there's just something, it's kind of like when we talked about Divine Right's Trip. We talked about Gurney Norman's book, how it was kind of a modern day Odyssey. And I think this falls in that line too. I mean, this is a man on his way home, on a path home. He meets all these characters, all these interesting individuals, and, faces death, rises again. It was a fantastic read. I highly recommend it. I need to check out some more Charles Frazier's work. And it really encouraged me, I think, as a writer. We talk about craft sometimes on here. It really encouraged me to get out of my comfort zone and try to, make things a little bit weird sometimes. Because there's times when it's so just stark, and you see the horrors of war, you see people betraying each other, you see people hurting each other, but then there's those other times where it's just, you meet a supporting character, you meet someone along Inman's path, and it's like, is this person even real? Like, who is this stranger up in the mountain, or in town or wherever? I don't know. There's just so many people that he comes into contact with, that it really makes you appreciate the oddities in this life, in my opinion. So great title. Check it out. Check out stoveleg.com. Leave a comment if you've read it or want to read it or like it. And hope to see y'all again on here. Thanks for supporting the channel. God loves you. I love you. Peace out till next time.